and welcome everyone. I've been enjoying all the presentations by all the business owners or the business development managers. Very interesting, especially in times of COVID. There's so many exciting business opportunities. And that brings us to my sharing today with franchising. Franchising is really, truly like a marriage. And you can see earlier from the presentations from all those business owners talking about why each business venture is special, each business venture is a win-win situation. And that's why I liken it to a marriage. It's very much a win-win. It's a relationship. So let me explain a bit. Today, I'll be talking a bit more on why is it like a marriage and what do you do when things get rocky? You know, as any marriage or any relationship is, with a win-win situation, both parties enter into the relationship with lots of eagerness, lots of excitement. And that's natural, right? Because, hey, I'm going to make revenue from your business franchise. You know, those who are listening in and listening to all that presentation, there is a reward at the end of it. All that hard work and effort with that branding and reputation and goodwill, there's a reward. There's profits at the end of the picture. But things may go wrong. So the reason it's like a marriage is franchises need franchisees and vice versa, especially at times of now, the pandemic. There are many capable, competent people who are either retrenched or somehow lost, not knowing what to do, not knowing the purpose. So it's a great relationship, a great joint venture. Because franchisers, and you've heard all of them have a great business plan, all of them also have a future. They are carving it out for you. In 3 years, we're going to be doing this. In 5 years, we're going to be here. So they have a very dynamic and robust business culture. They have a purpose and they have a lot of marketing and a team behind them, right? Franchisees come in with, I don't know what I want to do. Sometimes I'm stuck in my job and I'm just so frustrated. And you heard one lawyer even say that earlier in that video. It is true. Many are sometimes lost, purposeless, or feel that I'm stuck in a rut. I want to actually do something bigger. I want to maximize my potential. And that's where franchisees come in to tie in with franchisors. It's a great symbiotic relationship. With money and purpose, the franchisees come in. To collect money, the franchisors are there, but franchisors support. And that's why they collect money. That's why there's a franchise fee, because there's so much of support given. It's been proven, and there's data to show that any business, when you start from scratch and start new, there's higher chances of failing compared to a franchise business. And the reason for that is because a franchise business has been tried and tested. Yeah, it's been tried and tested. All these presenters earlier are showing businesses that were successful using a franchise system. So that's why there's higher chances of success. Now, just like marriages, franchisors and franchisees enter into the relationship with trust. They trust each other. And that's why also those of you who are keen to be franchisees, you will notice that there is an entire application process. It's not so easy to become a franchisee. A franchisor will vet you. So it is all of this. I want to trust you, so I need to vet what is your standing in the business, what's your standing in terms of credit and all of that. So there's a huge amount of trust. Just like franchisors trusting franchisees will also want to trust franchisors. Right? You are putting in money. You're taking your hard-earned money. You're starting a business venture. You want to make sure that you trust the franchisor with your hard-earned savings to allow it to grow through this business. So there's trust both ways. The other reason why it's also like a marriage is there's win-win, right? We come in all full-blown attitude with the right positive attitude. In the perspective of there's going to be win-win for both parties, right? And moving on to actually what is a franchise? You all heard it's actually a duplication of a business. A franchising system is a duplication of a successful business model. It uses intellectual property rights, trade secrets, know-how, business strategies, business methods, price lists, and so on. Everything is duplicated, so that's why it's easy to run the business. And there's a fee collected and so on. So these are the example of type of franchises. Franchisor can allow a unit franchise, which means you open one outlet. Franchisor might not look at unit franchise, and they might look at master franchisee, giving a certain country or certain region. They might give East Malaysia, West Malaysia, northern part of Malaysia, southern part of Malaysia, and that master franchisee then gives out unit franchises. Then you have regional franchisee. For example, a lot of Singaporean companies have taken up ASEAN for franchises, and then they give Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand to other parties, and they manage that franchise. So the role of a franchisor is that they become a developer. It's like developing the business into regions, into countries, and that's how they grow very fast. The whole franchise system originated from the US, and you can understand why, because the US has 42 states. It's not easy at all to grow a brand without help from the community, without help from other business owners, and that's how the franchise system started. It was all about win-win. Yeah, so what happens then when a relationship gets rocky? It's important for those tuning in because you're both franchisors and franchisees. So these are some examples of some case studies. Example of things going wrong. A franchisee does not pay on time and keeps delaying, and sometimes there is under-reporting. Under-reporting means that sometimes there is sales that's under-reported. As you can see earlier, there is a royalty fee charged, 8%, sometimes it's 5% on the sales earned by the franchisee, right? So sometimes there's under-reporting. And then when that happens, there's a dispute. Of course, there's a request for accounts, there's a investigation done, there's fraud sometimes discovered. These are examples that has happened in the past. Another example of things going wrong in this relationship is franchisor promises a lot of things. To promote the franchise nationwide, to train consistently, to always introduce new products to keep customers excited, but fails to follow through the promise. There's all these promises, and then they ask for a franchise fee. You pay a franchise fee, then you're lost with no training or not good training. You don't find innovation. There's no new products to keep customers excited, and there's no promotion and advertising, right? So that's where, again, a dispute arises, right? You then want to find out, what can I do about this if this doesn't happen? Another example of things going wrong between the two parties is that the development plan does not proceed as agreed by the franchisee, right? So some franchises, some franchise agreements and relationships have a request that within 5 years of this franchise, you develop at least 6 to 10 outlets or more, right? So there's a development plan organized or agreed between the parties. What happens then if that does not follow through? So that is an example of things that could go wrong. Another one is franchisee starts to create his or her own products, and there's their own marketing style. I don't know whether you remember this. It was very big in the news. The whole Cha Time and Tea Leaf. There was a whole issue, and it appeared a lot in the papers where Cha Time was before it became rebranded to Tea Life, was creating their own products, right? Coming up with their own bubble teas, different style bubble teas. And there was an issue from the Taiwanese company. So that is very common, actually. That issue of franchisee coming up with their own ideas, their own creativity, and coming up with their own products, it's very normal. And the reason for that is franchisee is a very interesting individual. They don't have the employee mindset. They do not have an employee mindset. They have a very entrepreneurial mindset. And entrepreneurs are creative. Entrepreneurs are innovative. But here, the franchisor is asking the entrepreneur to follow my rules, follow my agreement, follow my procedures, do things my way. And that's when there's a lot of sometimes friction, because There's a lot of frustration. I want to do things my way, right? That's when the franchisee sometimes clashes with the franchisor. And that's wrong when the franchisee goes on and does his own creativity and comes up with new products, even though it might increase sales. The reason it is wrong is there's inconsistency in the marketplace. Consumers are then confused. Can you imagine going into Starbucks in Ipoh and going into Starbucks in KL and going to Starbucks in Johor and finding things completely different and new products and not introduced in different outlets? It makes you feel that this is not a franchise. What is this? The value of the franchise drops because consumers want consistency. Of course, we want good products, but we want consistency. So this is where another situation of relationships can go sour between the franchisor and the franchisee. What happens next? How do we solve it? Just like marriages, right? It's not new to know couples argue. How do they solve it? What's the dispute resolution mechanism? Firstly, all franchise agreements should have an internal dispute resolution, meaning authorized representative from the franchisor and the franchisee meet up, try to resolve this within themselves, right? Most disputes can be resolved between the two parties. You might have the key person in both companies meeting up. And if this fails, let's say there's a time period given within 60 days, which is 2 months, the dispute needs to be resolved. If that fails, then you look at the second option, which is looking at mediation and arbitration. Mediation and arbitration are two different dispute resolution processes, right? One involves facilitated negotiation, that's mediation, meaning the parties come together and is facilitated by a neutral party. The dispute is then the resolving of the dispute is attempted through mediation. Arbitration is a specific center with arbitrators elected. That means there's a third party decision maker, right? And in Malaysia, there's the AIAC, the Asian International Arbitration Center, that can arbitrate disputes. So this is the second option. Arbitration and mediation are cheaper alternatives to litigation, which is the last resort, going to court. And just like marriages, right? There is contested divorces where it ends up in court and there's custody battles and fights against assets and so on. That's the last thing that you want, clearly, for franchisors and franchisees. But that's what both parties look at, litigation, if matters cannot be resolved. So let's explore. Can you imagine? I'm talking about 3 dispute resolution mechanism, right? That should all be included in your franchise agreements. And yet, there's many things that ended up in court. So today I will share with you cases that we have been heard in court. This case, SP Multitech Intelligent Homes, was a case where the franchise agreement was found to be unlawful and void. And when it's unlawful and void, what that means is that agreement shouldn't have been entered to in the first place. It does not exist. So void means that agreement's cancelled. That's what it means in layperson's term. And the franchisor was ordered to refund all payments and benefits received to the franchisee. Now, why was it considered unlawful? Let's look at it. Even though the agreement was called a master licensing agreement, the High Court and the Court of Appeal found that this business relationship between the two parties fell within the definition of a franchise under the Franchise Act 1998. It grants a franchisee the right to operate a business according to a franchise system, uses the franchisor's trademark and other intellectual property rights. There was a fixed term, and a franchisor had control. There was continuous control over the franchisee's business operations, and there was collection of fee or other form of compensation. So no matter what you call the agreement, if the business arrangement is a franchise, it's caught within the Franchise Act 1998. So the Franchise Act 1998 requires all franchises to be registered in the franchise registry in Putrajaya. Right, that's the one. I mean, you've heard Venture Grab announce it a number of times before. There is a 500,000 ringgit fine when franchises are not registered with Putrajaya. Yeah, for the first outlet. There's a 250,000 fine for subsequent outlets. But the worst part is this, is when there is a dispute and both parties are fighting it out in court for many reasons, so parties might be right, but there might be terms of the agreement that has been breached. And when that happens, you want to take it to court. In court, you then struggle because the agreement is said to be void. Another example is CIC. It's an education center where leaders are born. Here, the franchisee, again, had a dispute with the franchisor. The agreement was called the licensing agreement. Same decision as the previous case. It does not matter that the word franchise is not used anywhere in the agreement. The court will look at the terms of the agreement as a whole and the conduct of the parties in the background of the agreement to determine whether it is a franchise. Similar, yeah? So the effect is, it was void. So another case is to do with medical healthcare clinic. Here, it found that it was not a franchise system, even though the word franchise fee was used in the agreement. So you can see how it's interesting. The courts don't look at what the agreement says, they look at what the business arrangement is. So important for franchisors and franchisees to know that, because if you're thinking of disputes going to court, how do you then, what are the chances of your agreement being thrown out for being void? Here, even though franchise fee was referred to, there was no franchise system and there was no exercise of continuous control, and so there was no franchise agreement. Right? So it's a licensing relationship. And that question is always asked. As a franchise expert, we get that question a lot. Gita, let me just do a license because I haven't been in the industry for 3 years. And we go, it's very difficult to say, do a license because you haven't been in the industry for 3 years, because we know what's happening in court. What are the decisions that's being thrown out by the judges for agreements being considered void. Another case is Survey Malaysia, Hotel Survey Malaysia. Noaimi Alia with Hotel Survey Malaysia. Here, it's a different aspect that was caught in court. The franchisee wanted a renewal of the contract, and there was no renewals of the contract. And the court found that a non-renewal was constitutes an offence. Why is it an offence if I don't renew a franchisee? Well, our Malaysian Franchise Act 1998 requires you to renew a franchisee unless you have a very good reason not to renew. So the Act has certain parts in the Act that must be included in the agreement. So it's very important to make sure your franchise agreement is compliant with the Franchise Act in Malaysia. So there's compensation awarded to Noaimi for non-renewal. Another case is Dr. Fong, Singapore Max Brand Builder was the brand. Here is a case, I think this is my last case that was litigated in court. The Malaysian Court of Appeal affirmed that an unregistered franchise agreement is void for illegality. So here, Brand Builder, and you all would have heard of this brand because it's quite known. And it comes from Singapore. And Singaporean was a plaintiff, and they took action against the Malaysian franchisee. And what happened was they gave a master licensing agreement. And the court concluded that despite being governed by Singapore law, the master licensing agreement was void in Malaysia because Malaysia has a franchise act that everyone must adhere to. So this doesn't matter. Singapore, by the way, does not have a franchise act. Singapore has a franchise code of ethics. So there's no registration system in Singapore, but Singaporean franchises must be registered in Malaysia because of our Malaysian Franchise Act. So what the courts found is that this is a known fact. All the courts in the previous decisions have already had a similar conclusion. So there's nothing new to decide further. So yes, they confirmed that non-registration of the franchise will render the franchise agreement void. That's pretty much the cases for today to share with you. Very important because we get this question a lot. So when Venture Grab was talking about franchising, and also gets a lot of requests on this area. What is licensing? What is franchising? Can I just license my business? We wanted to share that part. And key points to note is that does your franchise business fall under the Act? Are you signing an agreement that is valid? So the two risks I talked about is once there's a penalty, right? There's a government penalty if you don't register the franchise, 500,000 penalty for the first outlet, 250,000 for subsequent outlets, and which I think actually is more fatal because this one depends on whether the government enforces this penalty. and sometimes the enforcement is not there. And when enforcement is not there, a lot of business owners take risk. Business is all about risk, right? Mitigating your risk. This one is more dangerous because, as shown to you in the previous cases, that's what franchisees do when you go to court about it not being void. So it's very important to have it registered because it's a simple decision in court, and courts immediately decide that that contract is void. So if it's void, any disputes that you have, it's very difficult to resolve it in court. Lastly, before I end, is do remember there is a special grant. There's a Matrix grant. I know there's another speaker talking about grants, but this is a different grant. I think this is a different grant. This is the Malay Market Development Grant, MDG, Market Development Grant. Matrix is assisting companies who are exporting their business. So if you're taking your franchise outside of Malaysia, then you're looking at being able to claim for these 5 areas. International certification for exports, which is the last one, registration of IP for overseas market, advertising and promotion for overseas market, and others, including logistics costs. These are the grants. If you need more information, you can request Venture Grab, or my details are here, so you can snapshot this slide. And anyone wants any franchise consultation, KASS is in agreement with Venture Grab. We're offering 30 minutes free franchise consultation for all of you attending here during today's BOeX 0909. So that's all. Thank you for your time, and I'll pass the session back to you, Hazwani.